What is up, people? I am almost certainly real here with Big Shredder Endless Run on Rogue Tower. The endless runs being a little bit long if I don't edit them, so pretty standard start. And I'm just going to jump ahead to the first Oogie here. We got pretty good luck here with the trees and houses. Also picked up Frost Keeps the Shredder. Obviously, want to get that going. And then got cannons as well. My thought with cannons is kind of have these nice long straightaways here. The cannons will do a pretty good job of applying Creeping Cough and the slow. And yeah, here comes Oogie running at 6x speed. That's the other reason that we're kind of doing these videos edited, is there's not really any danger on these single lanes. We're just kind of running single lane without the march to kind of give us the best shot as going as deep as we can into Endless. And the first 45 levels are really not particularly interesting on single lane. I think as long as you have a decent idea of kind of how the game works, pretty easy to get through. And then we pick up the chest, got a couple upgrades out of it, pretty nice, and then another range upgrade on the Frost Keeps. The Frost Keeps, I think, very important to get early, because you want to get the slow. The slow is super, super good on the Frost Keeps, but it's all the way behind the crit upgrades. So you can kind of see me repositioning that Frost Keep, trying to get good coverage there. But yeah, the slow is absolutely insane. I think it's almost a must take for Endless. In the regular game, it can just be a little unreliable, I think, to get the slow, just because you do need so many upgrades to get to it. That's sort of the wave 26 that feels like that's kind of a point where the game is pretty difficult. It can almost be tough to even get one or two of those slows, and it's something where you want to get all three of the slows. In the base game, you start off with 60% slow, and then you can get 3 additional, so you can get up to 90% slow. And that last 10% is huge, right? Like, you might think that since we have 60% slow, getting another 30% isn't that big of a deal, but the extra 30% is huge because slow has sort of increasing marginal utility. Going to go ahead and pick up mines here. I think pretty important to go mines and haunted houses. A little bit late, we don't even have haunted houses yet, but the amount of gold you get out of that kind of over the endless waves ends up being pretty darn significant, especially with going Big Shredder. But let's look at that slow again. So this here's a graph. We got our slow percent there on the x-axis, and then we've got our relative move speed there on the y-axis. So you can see at 50% slow, stuff would move 2 times slower. In Rogue Tower, the base max slow is 60% and stuff would move 2.5 times slower. But with the Frost Keep upgrades, we can get up to a 90% slow and stuff would actually move 10 times slower, which is kind of crazy, right? Because I think no matter what in Endless, you're going to get that 60% slow. With the cannons and the vampire layers, it's so easy to do that AoE poison creeping cough on so many units. I think it's pretty much a must take. If you think about that 60% slow as being kind of the baseline slow and then getting up to the 90% slow, going from 2.5 to 10 is actually a 4 times improvement, right? 10 over 2.5. So you're actually getting a bigger benefit going from 60 to 90% slow than you do going from 0 to 60% slow, which is kind of crazy to think about. And that's kind of what I was talking about in terms of the increasing marginal utility of slow, which sort of makes sense, right? Because stuff would be moving at 0% move speed at 100% slow. Stuff would take an infinite amount of time traveling any distance. So going from 99% slow to 100% slow would be basically an infinite increase in time, and it takes for a unit to walk a fixed distance, whereas going from 0% slow to 1% slow is basically pointless, and those are both a 1% increase. And that orange dotted line there is actually sort of a vertical asymptote where our relative move speed approaches positive infinity as we get closer and closer to that 100% slow. But let's get back to the game. So here we are on wave 24. Just before Oogie, we've got ourselves a good amount of haunted houses, which is nice. The single lane is just so easy that you can really just hard spam into income without any thoughts. And then we go ahead and pick up +1 damage to shields on our cannons because we are looking to get that 25% poison or maybe even the 50% poison. And that is locked behind the +1 to shields, and that's for the creeping cough slow. So here we are on the Oogie boss. You can see, we've got 8k gold in the bank. We're just going ahead and spamming those haunted houses because we picked up lookouts for single target, and it is pretty much the GOAT single target tower in this game. As long as you've got a bit of other stuff that can generate hits, because the lookout, if you're not aware, sort of adds all of its stats, including crit, to your other towers. So if you just get a couple levels, it adds the base damage, it adds the health damage, it adds the crit to your other towers, and it's kind of like a little bit of free single target damage. They are super great. I do think maybe a little bit of a mistake getting this early. If you notice on the left hand side, we have not gotten even one of the 10% slows, which I think in Endless you just kind of want to rush down, get that 90% slow going, and it not only really like improves your ability to do damage, but you also kind of get more experience as well, because towers get experience not based on the damage they do, but how long they are targeting enemies. So if you can slow stuff down, you can really get a lot more free experience. That said, you do have to be careful about killing stuff off, right? Like you can slow stuff down 90% to try to farm experience, but if you're just like killing stuff super quickly, it doesn't really help, right? I actually think when I do my vampire lair run, I want to give those guys a shot on Endless. I might try running at like kind of suboptimal amount of mana, right? Like kind of run like your mana below where it needs to be, so you can try and get the enemies as close to your tower as possible, and that lets you farm as much free experience as you can get, because with the endless mode you can really get a lot more free experience than you can in the base game. Yeah, but that is the 25 Oogie. We don't really have very much into armor damage. We've been spending most of our money on income, building out the haunted houses and the houses we missed. And we still pretty confident at taking him down there. And we get that 25% poison damage. You can see there up on the top menu. We already have creeping cough under the poison, so now our cannons there are going to start applying that slow. And you can see me starting to build some cannons just to kind of get the slow going earlier on, right? If we have 90%, turn one university, always pogging for that. But yeah, if we have that 90% slow, very quickly the other lanes will catch up. If we only have that 90% slow being applied in kind of our kill box will be pretty quickly overwhelmed with units. It's not necessarily a big deal if your kill box is pure 100% AoE, but if we're going big shredder, the big shredder is kind of like what I would call a soft AoE tower, in that it kind of does AoE damage, but as there are more and more units, it can get overwhelmed, right? Every time that blade hits, one base damage comes off, so it does less and less damage every time it hits an enemy, versus something like the mortar tower that just does everything in an AoE, and it doesn't matter how many units there are, it'll hit them all. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump ahead to the 35 Oogie. Okay, so here we are on 35. The big change is we picked up radars. If you watched my first game where I did Endless, we kind of got ruined by the single target on, I forget what wave we were at, I think 50, something like that. Slowly starting to level our shredder up, but still not particularly high level, about level 50 there. And again, really on these single lanes, not too a whole lot of a concern. You can see there, Oogie, we killed him before he got anywhere near our kill box. And that is really the power of those radars. They can start attacking him from as soon as he spawns. And then you can see we've got lookouts covering most of the path, and that is just kind of an insane single target combo. And then here we pick up the very last bleed upgrade. Pretty important to get that, because it's like a 4x crit as long as we can take advantage of all the bleed, right? We do have the bleed to crit 10%. We'll get the other 10% one, and that lets us use our bleeds up by doing crits, and we can kind of do that with the cannons and the cross keeps. And then here we are at 35. I think universities stopped spawning past 35, and we got 11, which feels like that is pretty good. Not like amazing or record setting, but considering you can get 0, no complaints about 11. And then with the endless mode, it kind of feels like you want to juice them a little bit more than you would in the normal game. I'm not sure how much, like what's the optimal university. It probably depends a little bit on what tower you're using. The fact that we're going big shredder maybe makes them a bit less valuable. I'm not sure. It does feel like it's kind of a big factor in how deep you can go, though. If you haven't played the endless mode, you do lose 2% university bonus per level past 45. But in total, I think it probably works out. You get like maybe an extra 10 levels worth of upgrades. something like that. I don't know that cannons were the best choice here in terms of doing AoE slow. Probably should have just gone for the vampire layers. My thought was just like the vampire layers shoot so slowly that the cannons might be a little bit more reliable because there's so much stuff that splits apart. You want to be reapplying that slow really quickly, right? And the vampire layers seem to almost end up shooting all at the same time. I'm not sure if that's true or not, or maybe just like the way the animation looks. But yeah, I was just kind of trying to really quickly get back up to that max slow and then also generate lots of crits because we have sort of eventually we will have 20% of the current bleed on an enemy target gets immediately applied on crit. And that's going to be super important, right? Because we're going to be applying really huge bleeds with our shredder, and the standard tick rate, I don't know, we'll get it up to a couple hundred, but that's just nowhere near what we need. I think probably like 95% of the actual bleed damage is going to come from critting the enemies, and the shredder is just so slow. We've got actually quite a bit of time to get those hits in between those shredder blades. And then you can kind of see there that we got plutonic solids, which is sort of the Minecraft polygon units that split apart, and they are health based. So that is basically a max roll for us here. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump to 45 and then we will be into endless. Okay, here we go. Level 44, just kind of filled out the cannonballs a little bit. You can see those everywhere, and then also a little bit of frost keeps, taking advantage of the very long range on the radars and using those kind of +5, +6 towers there near the portals to round out our single target damage, building those mines. And again, yeah, on the single lane, it's just so easy that you're just kind of running at max speed, trying to get to endless. And you can see there, we are up to 70% slow, which I think is a big problem, actually. You really, if you do this, really just try to push your frost keep earlier and get your slow going. I think I just got a little bit overconfident with the number of trees I had. It's not going to be an issue for us right now, but that 90% slow is just so strong. And that last 10%, you go from 80% to 90%, stuff is moving at 20% speed or 10% speed. So that last 10% is like double the slow, right? You go from 5x speed reduction to a 10x speed reduction. Also starting to fill out there with some more frost keeps. Want to try to get quite a few of those down just for generating those crits so we can take advantage of that bleed. You can see there up at the top under our bleed, we do have that 20% bleed to crit. And so the shredder attacks once every 6 seconds. So we sort of have 6 seconds to try to get in quite a few crits. Because there's so many units that split apart, we do really want to use that bleed up ASAP. So ideally, by the time the shredder blade fires again, we've already split the unit apart if possible, right? And because we are getting the crit upgrades on the frost keeps, they are a pretty efficient tower, I think, for generating those crits. They kind of have lots of those little particles and then generate quite a few hits. I think they can kind of get overwhelmed by lots of units. Those little particles disappear when they hit stuff. But that is also why we have the cannons. They end up getting an okay crit chance via quality over quantity, which gives 1% crit per level. And then in this endless mode, you just get so much free experience because the game goes on for so much longer. You kind of can just, I think, get up to like mid-20s as long as you have stuff kind of built by probably like wave 35 to 40. The later waves are definitely a lot more experience because they just take so much longer than the earlier waves, and they get experience just for basically having something to target. And then a little bit of a tough choice here. We have the Golden Forest and the Cooling Rods. The Cooling Rods behind that is another 10% slow. But we have so many trees that I kind of figured I want to get those 2 tree chops and then want to use those kind of wave 50 plus, you get 100% chance of getting a chest. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't lose. I was nervous about losing without ever getting the chance to chop, so ended up picking up the tree there. And then we are there up to level 94 on the shredder. A little bit of a tough choice here on the different options. Collateral, maybe not a great choice. Could have gone with the crit instead, just for more reliable bleed. And then if you look, our shredder only has 60 damage for gold total, which looks terrible, but you'll notice even here on Endless, we're on to 50, and that shredder is not firing very often, we're still killing stuff off there with kind of the cannons we've got going, the frost keeps and the radars doing a pretty good job cleaning stuff up. And the other thing to take into account with the damage for gold is a lot of stuff, like a lot of the cannons and stuff like that, we have not been putting any gold into them, and they've been getting a lot of free experience and a lot of free levels, and that doesn't get taken into account for damage in gold. So I think for like our cannons, our lookouts, stuff like that, there's probably like maybe even like 5 or 10 times the amount of gold that we've put into building them, they've gotten in free experience and free upgrades, which kind of makes it a little bit difficult to compare. I think I continuously have requests to make the damage for gold table more complex, but yeah, it is better than nothing. And one tip, you can turn off the those little messages you see popping up everywhere. It's not as bad if you're playing on like 1x speed, but also you can turn them off and it makes stuff quite a bit less laggy if you're running, especially on multiple speed, but even at regular speed, it is pretty nice to turn those off. It's in the UI options. Then there is the Golden Forest too, so that kind of unlocks chopping for us. I don't know why I'm upgrading those cannons. I think my theory crafting is to give them a little bit of stuff so they can apply that creeping cough poison, because the creeping cough poison is kind of based on how much damage you do. So the more damage you do, the higher percentage of slow you will do. Bonus to all research, not super useful at this point. The deep freeze used to be absolutely insane and would be broken, but it now has a declining freeze duration. So anytime you hit an enemy and freeze them, the freeze time goes down to eventually the point where they don't get frozen at all. It's not the worst thing in the world, because when the units split apart into the other units, they do reset that freeze duration. And then a pretty big fail here, getting another tower unlocked. We got forced into picking a tower there, which kind of sucks. The poison sprayer though, not bad. It does that slow in an AoE. Just gonna go around and pop them down anywhere a poison sprayer might be decent. And they will give us some more AoE slow. They'll give us some more AoE crits for that bleed crit that we're looking for. So not the worst tower, but really we already have kind of too many unlocked, and we're still only at that 70% slow, which is a big fail. And then, yeah, just up to 20k gold. Pretty easy to get rid of your gold when you spam upgrades into the shredder, starting to cost about 4k a piece to upgrade. And you can see here we're on an Oogie level, and those planes are just absolutely ruining him. He's not even close to our kill box, and his armor is almost already gone. That radar and lookout tower just feels like the most cost-effective way to deal with single target, because it really just doesn't take very much investment. Those lookouts, I think, basically just drop them down and they level themselves up. Same with the radars. Maybe got a little bit of investment, but that combo just goes pretty darn hard. But yeah, just filling out where we can get those poison sprayers so we can get this slow going on these guys earlier, because like we mentioned before, we got to be a little bit careful with the slow that we don't get overwhelmed if we are only slowing in our kill box. So if you are wondering why we are going a big shredder, I've mentioned this in my past videos on big shredder, but never really looked at it. We're just going to do the smallest amount of math. So basically, every tower in the game kind of works like this. So this is essentially the damage for a ballista. Is it starts off with 12 health damage. We're looking at just health damage to simplify stuff. And then it has 10 base damage, and those multiply together. And then so as you level up, assuming you're just leveling health up, you know, we're kind of adding 1 to your base damage, adding 1 to your health damage, and that scales up super quickly, right? We have this kind of non-linear function there. But also, our costs scale up in a similar quadratic fashion. So it starts at 100 cost, and then it's like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, which is the same thing as 10 times the sum of natural numbers. The sum of natural numbers, that is 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5, and so on. And that's what this x squared plus x divided by 2 is. And so you can see the costs also kind of explode up there really quickly. And then if we take the first one, divide it by the second one, that gives us kind of our damage per gold, kind of damage per gold effectiveness. And you can't even really see it there. We'll zoom in a little bit there, but you can kind of see me highlight it there. It's kind of just along the axis.
But the Shredder is unique. And I will say you can't use this to compare two towers. Obviously, like, we're not even looking at attack speed. Does it do AoE, range, all that kind of stuff. But just looking at the way the towers scale with respect to level. And I'm kind of ignoring quality over quantity because I'm lazy, and theoretically quality over quantity eventually maxes out. So the Shredder, very similar thing for cost. It is a 500 base cost, and then it's like 30, 60, 90 for the upgrades, and also goes up very quickly. But the damage is different. So the Shredder, if you're not aware, every time it hits an enemy, its base damage goes down by 1. And so it eventually disappears once it loses all of its base damage. So basically, when the Shredder is at a base level unupgraded, it has 10 base damage, and so it'll do 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus, or 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8 plus 9 plus 10 damage, and then that is multiplied by the health. So I am just looking at health here again. So the 21 base health damage on the Shredder, and then this formula here is that sum of natural numbers that we had before, right? But we do start with a base of 10, and then that goes up by 1 every level. So if you think about it, kind of like we're hitting an additional enemy every time we level up our Shredder. And so if we look at our damage here for the Shredder divided by the cost for the Shredder, this top term is actually cubic and the bottom term is quadratic. So the limit of this function is positive infinity. And let's go ahead. Let me get rid of this. Let me add this back in. Let's zoom in. We will change our y-axis here to, let's go with 10 and then maybe -1 here. So you can see kind of this is the ballista, and it approaches, I think probably 0.2 will be the limit of this. But the Shredder just keeps going up and up and up. And you can see kind of the damage effectiveness. There's a couple inflection points here at level 20. We're getting about 2.8 damage. Not that 2.8 actually really means anything, but up at level 200, we are getting sort of 8, which is about 3 times more, right? It's about 3 times more damage effective theoretically. There's a huge number of sort of qualifications. Like, we have to actually have 200 units to hit for it to do full damage. We can't overkill anything, which is a problem. So this is like pure military grade copium, but it is interesting, right? I think at least it's interesting. If anybody's still watching, I feel like everybody's just like skipped through this part back to the game. I don't blame you, but it's kind of interesting. And like, even though there is a lot of caveats and stuff like that, if we think the Shredder is a good tower in the base game, then there is like reason to believe that, hey, like, although this actual formula is not perfect, it gives us kind of an indication. Like, it's, even if it's only like 50% true, it does still, mean that the Shredder is potentially a good tower to take us deep into Endless. Anyways, let's get back to the game. Okay, so I skipped us ahead to 75. You can see we did get one more 10% slow, but we are still missing the last 10% slow. And we have had to chop all of our trees. So definitely a huge mistake. You can see our Shredder starting to get pretty high on levels there, up to 192, 43,000 on that health damage. Our armor and shields are definitely pretty far behind. Most of the damage we need to do is health damage, but I think I probably should have got some more levels into shields and armor, just because like we still need to get through the shields and armor, and the actual very final units in Plutonic Solids actually have a good amount of shields and armor. They have, I think, 9,000 armor, 9,000 shields, and 9,000 health. Then the other units that split out of that guy kind of have a little bit of armor and shields, but mostly health. Like, the biggest health unit is 3,000 shields, 3,000 armor, and then 15,000 health. But I do think maybe could have picked up a little bit more on the armor and shields. We do naturally kind of have bonus damage against health as well, because the bleed does full damage to health, and then it does sort of half damage to armor and shields. And stuff's getting kind of close. Got kind of a lookout obelisk there in the back line. I think big mistake on that, just in terms of unlocking more stuff that makes it harder for us to get the slow. Definitely a little bit of self-griefage. Then again, you know, the Shredder does not look like it has the greatest damage effectiveness here, but you got to keep in mind that a huge amount of our damage from our Shredder is showing up in the dot damage. And then the other towers are getting so many free upgrades because we're really just cranking all of our gold into the Shredder. But stuff is starting to kind of get through here. You can see there we are up to +3 move speed. And so I think the slowest guys have 1 move speed. So that's like kind of a lot of additional speed for them to have. They're moving 4 times faster now at 4 speed instead of their base of 1 speed. And we are missing that last 10% slow. That's so critical. So a little frustrating. I feel like I kind of griefed myself. And I feel like we got a pretty good seed, right? We got pretty good universities. It feels like we got pretty good haunted houses. Our map is pretty decent. And getting that last slow upgrade would just be so huge for us. Because I do think eventually there's a point where the units are just going so fast, it doesn't even matter how much damage we're doing. It's the number of shots we can get off with our Shredder because it is so slow. There are units that split apart like 5 times. And we just have to get like that many hits in with our Shredder because basically everything else is doing pretty marginal damage except for kind of our radars and obelisks. But otherwise, we really do not have a whole lot of damage. And you can see Grim Oogie starting to make it to our kill box, which is a little bit unbullish. Then unfortunately here, we do not get the slow again. I don't know how good Icebreakers is. The frozen enemies take an additional base damage. It feels like units are just not frozen for a very long time. So I just don't know how impactful that is, especially considering our Shredder is already up to like 200. So just grabbing Lifesteal there to try and help support some of our poison sprayers there, starting to use up a bit more mana. The Frost Keeps are really nice. They use a flat amount of mana, whereas other towers, as they level up, they start to use more and more mana. So the Frost Keeps, very mana efficient, and kind of trying to build some more just for generating more crits, right? We only do 20% of the bleed damage on every crit, so we want to be doing a good number of crits. 5 crits gets you about 66% of the bleed damage done. 10 crits gets you about 90% of the bleed damage done. But yeah, definitely can see stuff is starting to make it a little bit farther. We're starting to take those hits. And again, I do really recommend turning off those damage numbers. It really does help with the performance. You can see it's kind of chugging here. I think I probably should have instead just been pumping this gold into my Shredder. But I was kind of concerned that we just had like a little bit too much into the Shredder. Because if you think about it, the highest HP units have 15,000 health, and we've got a 25x multiplier basically, which is about 400,000. But our Shredder has 43,000 damage, but then we have a 4x crit, and then we have a 300% bleed. So every damage we do for Shredder is basically 4 base damage, assuming it crits, right? Then the bleed is going to be 300% of that for 12. So 4 base damage plus 12 bleed is a 16x multiplier against health. Against shields and armor, it's kind of like a 10x multiplier. The 4 base and then the 12 divided by 2, 6. So 4 plus 6, 10 against shields and armor. And we are doing 43,000 damage to health, and 43,000 times 16 is about 700,000. So we are kind of still in like one-shot range against the very high HP guys. So just trying to shore up our last little bit of defense. You can kind of see this split here. And like if a Shredder Blade happens to go down one side of those splits while another enemy is going up the other side, it's kind of actually a big loss for us, right? Because of how slowly that Shredder shoots. Stuff can kind of sneak through that little split path, which is a bit unfortunate. The new paths like that, kind of actually a nerf to Shredders, I think. Because when the game first came out, there's none of those split straightaways. All the straightaway paths that were not actual splits into new openings did not have kind of any interior splits in them. So I don't think it's the biggest deal, but that's kind of like what I'm theory crafting here is maybe just like trying to have a little bit of backline to clean up stuff that kind of sneaks through. But yeah, I think the obelisk definitely a mistake and really should have just used radars to try to do that. The radars do ramp up in cost though super quickly. Another big mistake, I think, was not having any kind of targeted slow for Oogie. We could have used a cannon for this, or maybe even the poison sprayers. The poison sprayer is a little bit short range to do this, but Oogie, you can just kind of target slow him because you know he's going to come out the longest path, and you can use that to spread Oogie out from the rest of the wave pretty effectively, and I didn't do that. I think that was another big mistake that I made. But yeah, no slow again. Bit of a rip F on that. But yeah, if we had Oogie target slowed, I think I could have used the radar kind of for that single target, cleaning stuff up that makes it past the shredder. And then Oogie would have been slowed down enough that they would still have time to finish him off. Because all of our frost keeps and other towers would be able to get a lot more hits in on Oogie if we had him slowed and separated from the rest of the pack. But yeah, we are now up to almost 27 times scaling. The scaling on health does really ramp up here very quickly in the later game. I think the max achievement is like at 1,000% health. So if you do want to get the achievement, definitely just go Frost Keeps, get that 90% slow, unlike me getting 80% slow. And I think actually Vampire Layers is probably the best way to do it. I actually have another run that I've done with Vampire Layers that I did after this run, but sort of before I finished editing this. It is a bit of a chore to edit these videos versus just playing the game and recording myself. And I got up to level 95 on that. So yeah, those Vampire Layers are pretty powerful. I will post that video. If you're interested in watching it, please do subscribe. I will probably, I think maybe just skip right to Endless on it. I don't know that I'm going to go through the first 45 levels. I think kind of boring on single lane, and really it's just me getting 90% slow on my Frost Keeps and then going on to get like kind of the health and crit upgrades, stuff like that. I do want to do a cannon run. I do want to do another shredder run. I think definitely a lot of mistakes. I mean, the big one, not getting 90% slow. You can see stuff is starting to get through there, and we are taking some serious loss of life. But yeah, I also want to give the split sway, four-way Splitsville a try with the Vampire Slayers. It feels like they are quite strong and might be good for that with their very large AoE. Kind of can cover a couple lanes and a good number of splits, but yeah, enjoying the patch overall. I think quite a lot of new content between the new towers and then also the endless mode. So definitely going to be doing some more videos. Definitely going to get out that 95 run, and then also I do want to do cannons too. I think cannons maybe with the way that their damage scales, with the hit more units, can kind of take advantage of that to maybe do some really good damage in endless, because the number of units does scale up as we get deeper and deeper into endless, I believe. So some potential for some good damage. Unfortunately, if you do watch the cannons, there's kind of like a max distance that they shoot, which is a little bit unfortunate. They don't actually like continue all the way down these straightaways. You'll notice that they kind of like stop. There is some range upgrades, which I assume kind of makes that distance a little bit longer, but it's not like they will go flying down a massive long path. What I'll probably do is I'll just like play the first 15 levels, 15, 20 levels, and see what I get out of that, and then kind of decide, because I think no matter what, I'm basically just going to go Frost Keep and get the Frost Keep going first and try actually not to unlock anything else until much later, which is kind of nice because it lets me sort of see what the map looks like, and then if we get a good Shredder map, I'll try to do a Shredder one. And then again, yeah, we did not get the slow, so kind of a little bit griefed there. But that is definitely my own fault. We have like, what, 25 towers unlocked there at the bottom. So, yeah. You can see me, I'm just kind of a little bit desperate here. Just like, do I upgrade stuff? Do I level stuff up? So I'm just kind of trying to figure out what to do. And here you can see I do go and I put stuff here onto progress on my radars, which is a decent temporary solution. But when Oogie shows up, then all of a sudden that causes problems. Really, yeah, I'm really disappointed that I did not think to target slow Oogie, because I feel like that is like a very very standard rogue tower strategy. Normally with the ballistas, you just build a couple kind of along your longest path and you target them on most health, and that guarantees that Oogie shows up sort of after the waves. Changing our radars over to progress kind of buys us a little bit of time there, but not necessarily a crazy amount. You can see me kind of putting some of the other ones there onto progress, and that does help our single target damage clean up there. We're doing a little bit better. There is an amount of RNG in terms of what units actually spawn, but you can see we're still losing a little bit of life there. We did only get 1 level into banditry, so kind of saving us. I guess we would be taking 4 damage instead of 2 damage. We would take twice as much damage, so we'd still be okay here. We're not yet below half health, although we might have gotten healed up. I'm not sure. I don't think we dipped below 32. But yeah, you can see me just change over the radars to progress, buy us a little bit more time cleaning up those units that make it through our shredder. But the shredder is still doing pretty good damage. You can kind of see as the blade goes flying through. Looking at the units, I definitely think maybe missing out on getting some armor and shield upgrades on it. And you can see, I don't think I mentioned this before, that we sold out of our universities, and that's because they're at like minus like 50% chance. You're not going to get anything out of your universities past around like 60 or so. So you definitely want to sell them off eventually, kind of once your chance to get additional damage falls below 0. You don't lose damage, thankfully. That would be a bit of a problem. Same with the gold. You can see that we are at minus 64 gold, which I think would give us minus gold per kill, theoretically. But you don't actually lose gold killing stuff. There's sort of a hard cap at 0 gold, or a hard, not a cap, whatever the opposite of a cap is. I guess a floor on the sort of amount of gold that you get per kill. We could also theoretically sell out of like houses and haunted houses, but I think that's basically never worth it in terms of like, that's the only gold we're getting, right, is our haunted house gold, and then also our house gold. We do still get that going, and that is actually like pretty impactful, right, is we get about, I think, 10k. We definitely got pretty good luck on getting quite a few houses, and then also our haunted houses pretty good, and then mines also pretty decent, up to 64 max HP, which is basically, we start at 20, is over 3x the gold that we're getting out of those mines, so pretty good. And then we did not get the slow again, pretty big fail. And then nothing here is particularly great for us, I don't think. The poison's not bad, it lets us slow a little bit faster theoretically, but we're actually missing the 10% crit to poison, which makes the additional damage probably not really impactful. I'm kind of running my cannons as like my secondary tower. I was kind of thinking if we made it deep enough and we got all the upgrades for the cannons, they would be a good combo for the shredder as well. And then, you know, as I mentioned before, they are decent at doing the creeping cough. They are decent at kind of proccing the crits for our bleed to crit damage, or I guess our crit to bleed damage. But we are kind of on a timeline, right? You can see me moving back some of the radars to be targeting Oogie, because he is going to pop out in a level. And if we had him target slowed, we would be in a lot better spot. But using our radars there for that last little bit of single target, really just kind of buying us time till 80, because we definitely need that damage cranking on Oogie to be able to kill him off. Yeah, and at this point we are like just staying ahead of the damage we need to do. We've got those units getting pretty close to our tower. But it is pretty satisfying to watch the saw blade. You can kind of watch it go down the path and just absolutely crank damage into those units. We've got 577,000 gold into our shredder. Pretty nice. Our haunted houses giving us 300k gold alone. I think in a regular game getting to 45 levels, I want to say like you earn 300k if you get really good luck, but usually closer to 200, I think. The damage for gold, I know it doesn't look great for the shredder, but I think it's actually pretty good considering how much gold we've pumped into it. and how many free levels everything else is getting, because these endless waves take a lot longer than the base game waves, and so stuff is getting so much free experience that I think a lot of our other towers basically have like multiple times more money in free experience than actually invested into them. Or at least that's my copium, and we are definitely starting to take some hits here, slowly creeping down there in life, just kind of praying we make it through this wave and then we get ourselves the 10% slow, because it does not look good with Oogie coming out, and our radars need to be retargeted. Starting to get pretty seriously concerned about losing, even potentially on this level, although it is definitely starting to thin out. You can see kind of as the shredder blades come out, we can slowly start pushing the wave back, and then it kind of slowly gets pushed back further and further as the shredder blade is able to get more control. I decided to sell out of some of the cannons, mostly because I wanted to get to level 200 on my shredder, but theoretically, you know, kind of we're using them for creeping cough, and creeping cough applies slow as a percentage of your damage. And so having the shredders be higher level and all those university upgrades is they should max slow even like with one shredder. And here we are, we did not get the slow. So not great. You'll notice I'm not taking the shredder crit chance. That is because we are crit capped. We actually don't need any crit upgrades on our shredder because the 200 levels is enough to get that 150% crit is the max crit. Having more than 150% crit, I don't believe does anything for you. I'm almost positive, at least on the tooltip, it doesn't show anything, and I'm almost positive that's the way it works. So I wasn't really prioritizing the shredder upgrades because you get like university crit, you get some crit from enemies bleeding. I think about level 125, you end up max crit on any tower as long as you kind of have those global upgrades. The flat damage, I don't know, maybe I should have been more on top of picking those up. I kind of figured with the university upgrades and how many upgrades we were getting on the tower, they weren't going to be that impactful. And we really, yeah, we just got too many towers. The obelisk definitely could have been left out. I think the cannons I would swap out with vampire layers and use the vampire layers to do AoE poison damage. And then the poison sprayers, yeah, they don't feel like they really have a place. They're just kind of like almost a worse version of the cannons for us, I think, in the sense that they kind of just have a shorter range in terms of the area that they're applying that slow creeping cough to. But we did get forced into picking the poison sprayers, and I think not terrible in terms of like what they're doing for us, but kind of terrible in the sense that they are polluting our card pool and making it much, much harder for us to draw that last 10% slow. So I think my endless runs are almost always just going to be me rushing down, maybe not all of the upgrades for the frost keeps, but the overwhelming majority of the upgrades that I need to get that 90% slow, and then look at other towers. The downside to that, though, is it takes a lot longer for you to get your other towers out there, which means they're getting less free experience. And then you can see Oogie, he still has shields left, and it is not looking very successful. I think we've already pretty much lost, but I'm cheating and hiding it because, oh no, we're on 5 life, checking, but we are probably, I think we've probably lost. If you don't have your UI open, it won't show the lost screen. But Oogie, yeah, we are just getting into his armor, and we've definitely lost there. So a good run overall, I think. We're up to 31 times on the health, armor, and shields. I think I learned a lot on this run, mostly that you really need to rush down those Frostkeep upgrades early. And I actually tested out March. I mentioned earlier that I had a run to 95 sort of after I recorded this, but before I edited it, and I will have that coming out. So if you are interested, do subscribe. But I ran that 95 on March just so I could get more upgrades, because here with the Shredder, we're kind of not getting that many upgrades, but I did my 95 run with the Vampire Layers, And there's actually a lot of upgrades. You want to get all the dot upgrades, you want to get all the crit upgrades, and then I do think you definitely want to get lookouts and radars going for the single target. And you can see there we don't even manage to kill Oogie off. That's kind of what I wanted to see there, whether or not we'd manage to kill him off, and we were not successful. But yeah, with March getting those double upgrades every level, it lets you get your slow a lot faster, and then it lets you get your other towers out a lot faster and get them leveling up, get all that juicy free experience. And I kind of theory crafted like maybe eventually I'd just be able to take a bunch of like minus gold upgrades, which eventually don't affect you in endless. But I won't spoil that run. It's, I think, kind of interesting. I think I'm going to try it without March as well for the vampire layers. It does feel like the best strategy, if you want to try to go really deep, is probably to re-roll the first 15 levels until you get some kind of like Gosu S tier start. But yeah, I think the one thing that I don't like about this run is it does feel like we got really, really good RNG for a Shredder, and then I think made some pretty big mistakes in terms of not getting to 90% slow, and then also not target slowing Oogie. But that's all right. You gotta learn as you play. If we got a perfect run right off the bat, it wouldn't be very fun. So I definitely want to do another Shredder one. I will post my Vampire 95 run as well. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you all have a great day. Oh, and yeah, like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what you think about the editing. Do you guys want to see more, see less? I think I'm probably in the future for the endless runs just going to jump right to the endless portion. Maybe show like 45 and then like kind of jump to the last 5 levels or something like that before I lose, because these endless runs are pretty long. And then also I feel like the first 60 levels, it really just like, it doesn't matter on single lane. It's so easy that it's not like my choices are really particularly impactful. Alrighty, that is it. I will stop rambling. Have yourselves a great day.